Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I say good evening even because I'm aware that we have a couple of registrants even from as far away as Iran to this seminar. So I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us today at our second session of the ITU Regional Radio Communication Seminar. This is being jointly hosted by the International Telecommunication Union and the Caribbean Telecommunications Union. I am Nigel Casimir, the telecommunications specialist at the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, and we are hosting the webinar today. And before we get started, I want to share a few tips so that you can participate successfully. When you log in, the next time you log into the webinar, please sign in with your information in the following order: first name, last name, an abbreviation for your organization and country. So for example, for myself, it would be Nigel Casimir, CTU, Trinidad and Tobago, or TT. You can use your 2-letter country code, top-level domain abbreviation for your country. That would make it short and understandable. This is important because it'll make you easily identifiable for entering the seminar and for posing questions and for interventions if necessary. During the presentations, we ask that you post your questions in the Q&A box in order for them to be seen and efficiently addressed. The Q&A box is accessible by clicking the Q&A button located at the bottom of your Zoom window. Using the Q&A is especially important for this seminar because there are hundreds of persons registered and there would be limited opportunities for verbal interventions. You can use the chat button for sharing general comments and information with panelists and/or with all attendees. Note, however, that the default setting for chat is for the message to go only to all panelists. So you have to be sure to select your desired recipients, whether it's all panelists only or all panelists and attendees, when you're entering your comment in the chat box. Make sure you select that appropriately. The seminar presentation slides are and would be posted on the event webpage on the ITU website. And we've also put a message for where the slides can be found into the chat window. And this seminar will continue every weekday at this time during these next 2 weeks, this week and next week. So I'd like to move on now and get into the meat of our presentations for this, our second day. And for this, I would now like to introduce you to Mr. Joaquin Restrepo from the Radio Communication Bureau of the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, and he would guide us through this first session today. Joaquin.
Thank you, Nigel. Welcome, everybody. Thanks again for following us. Today's sessions, we will have 2 parts. The first part, I'm going to make a presentation about the basic principles and matters of the radio regulation and their connection with the national spectrum management regulatory framework. We had then the break, and after the break, we are going to discuss about the RRC-19 and RRC-23. First, we will start about the main outcomes of RRC-19. The first part presented by my colleague Jorge Sicorosi about the space services, followed by our colleague Nikolai Vasiliev, the chief of terrestrial services, about the terrestrial part for that. And on the second part of this session, they are going then to make a similar presentation about the RRC-23 agenda for space-related topics and terrestrial-related topics. Before starting, I like to share with you some of our material. Yesterday, there were 2 missing questions, 2 pending questions. One was related about SNTP. We have already asked our colleagues from BDT. We are waiting for his for the feedback. The other question was related about the future spectrum monitoring handbook. Then let me share with you the screen. And I refer to this letter. This is a document from Annex 12, document 1C226 from June 19. Effectively, this is the work in progress about correspondent group of developing a new edition of the ITU handbook on spectrum monitoring. The consideration is about consolidate proposal about section of the existing handbook needing to be reviewed, inclusion of possibly new sections, structure of the new handbook. The result of this discussion shall be presented, as say here, on the next meeting of Working Party 1C in 2020, and the next session will be here. Sorry, I haven't copied it here. Well, I get back. The next session of Working Party B is planned at the end of this year in November. Then at the end of November, we will have the result of this correspondence group and discussion about this new handbook. Meanwhile, I like to invite interested people anyhow to visit our website on the different ITU report on spectrum management, because there are several recent publications related to these monitoring topics. So you could see here on spectrum management reports, the full list. And if you could browse it, you could see especially the latest publications, for example, technical characters for non-inductive wireless, electromagnetic field measuring to assess human exposure, and so on. Well, saying that, let's get now to my presentation. Just to confirm, do you see now the full screen, the slide?
You have to stop sharing the previous window.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I need to share the new one, yeah. Okay, I need to share this one.
Yes, we are seeing it.
Then we are going to present the most basic concepts of the radio regulation. Again, apologies for those participants that are very, very familiar with the radio regulation, but we need to make this introduction to ensure that all participants will have the minimal necessary background to fully understand the rest part, the other parts, when my colleagues from Terrestrial and Space Service are going to explain in full detail all the procedures about station registration, resolving interference situation, international recognition, and so on. This is the content I'm going to skip. First part, just have in mind the radioelectric spectrum is a portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. This is a very first point, because on non-specialized literature and some even people from the sector, the journalists and so on, used to make a confusion talking about electromagnetic waves or electromagnetic spectrum. In our case, remember, electromagnetic is from 0 and to the infinite, including infrared, ultraviolet, gamma rays, and so on. The radio waves is a portion that we have defined arbitrarily lower than 3000 gigahertz. Then the radioelectric spectrum, that is what by default we name it a spectrum, is only frequencies below 3000 gigahertz. Frequencies above it are not yet part of the radioelectric spectrum. And we have also a definition of the telecommunication, any as considered the radio regulation, any transmission or reception of signs, writing emails by wire, radio, optical, or other electromagnetic system. In this case, we are dealing with the radio. Understand by radio waves, this frequency is lower than 3000 gigahertz. It gives me the opportunity to make a clarification about two situations. Let's first, for example, infrared. There are on the market several products that you could make a point-to-point link using infrared beams. National regulator, they could take care of that. They could regulate that if they wish, but just be careful because the regulation of that is beyond any regulation of the spectrum, basically because their frequencies are about 3000 gigahertz. The frequencies are here in infrared in order of terahertz. Other example, cable TV. Cable TV, of course, the frequencies are in VHF or US band, then it complies with that, but it's propagated using a coaxial cable. Then in that case, it's not propagated in a space without artificial gate. It's not propagated in the open space. Then again, cable TV, unless potential situation of interference because of desired the radiations, are not part of the regulation of a spectrum because it's a confining mean. And in that sense, also optical fiber, it doesn't comply any of them. Optical fiber frequency is a lot higher than 3000 gigahertz and it's not in an open space. Then again, when we talk about radioelectric spectrum, by default spectrum on all this presentation, we are dealing with frequency below 3000 gigahertz and propagated without artificial guide. I mean, propagated in the open space. The spectrum is considered by most administration as and also by ITU as a natural resource. It's a natural resource because of a phenomenon of the nature. It's not replicable in the sense that you cannot reproduce. It's not agriculture. You cannot see the frequencies and pushing trees of bands, etc. Then it's scarce, and the scarcity is something that could be relative. It could be more scarce or less according to the frequency. But we could say that in general, the scarcity is because the quantity of information of megabit per second per megahertz is limited. That's true that the development of technology is pushing up that limit. But anyhow, as most engineers must know, we have the theoretical limit of the Shannon's principle, limiting the maximum capacity of a given channel. Then, because of these features, a spectrum need to be shared by station using the same frequency. And that's at the end, the big deal, the reason of spectrum management. How to use efficient and rational spectrum at a national and international level. And with the main goal, prevent and control interference. It means maximize the sharing while minimizing the prejudice. How to share more and more the frequencies, guaranteeing that this sharing is not having negative effect on the services. Because the spectrum is a phenomenon of the nature, you cannot limit it, you cannot stop the spectrum in a given barrier on the borderline. Then you cannot limit the action of the spectrum to a given territory, and that's why it's necessary an international coordination. And that's basically the sense of the ITU radio regulation. Now, we had explained that yesterday. This is part of the regulatory framework of the ITU. In that sense, the radio regulation is an international treaty that is elaborated and revised by administrations during the World Radio Conference. And also very important, the radio regulation is a binding nature for ITU members. And ITU is acting as the depositary of these radio regulations. Latest version, we had explained yesterday, the Radio Regulation 2016, containing the decision of the WRC 15, and we expect to release the new version this year, at the end of this year, with all the modifications decided by the WRC 19. Then the new edition of the radio regulation will be valid until 24, when we will have a new version as a result of the conference 23. Then I invite you on the months ahead to visit our website looking for the newest version of the radio regulation. and is available on the 6 United Nations languages. Some of the main principles of that are contained on the preamble of the radio regulations, ratifying what we have just said, radio frequencies at the geostationary satellite orbit are limited natural resources, and they must be used rationally, efficiently, and economically in conformity with the radio regulation, guaranteeing the equitable access. As you can imagine, this diversity of access, rationality, efficiency, economic, and equitable access, they used to clash each other. Then precisely one of the main activities on the spectrum community is how to establish a good balance between these 4 principles in order to guarantee that all of them could be satisfied in the best manner, and then giving the necessary trade-off. Also on the number 4, all stations cannot cause harmful interference to the radio service of other members. Then, again, the principle, avoiding interference to stations of providing services in other territories, because the spectrum is not limited to a given territory. On the regulatory documents we have provided Friday on the pre-seminar web tutorial, you could find out a file named regulatory documents, and within you find the radio regulations in English, French, and Spanish. This is basically composed by these 4 books: Volume 1, containing the articles; Volume 2, the appendix; Volume 3, resolutions and recommendations; Volume 4, I2R recommendation incorporated by reference, and that is complemented by a set of maps necessary for Appendix 27. My colleague for terrestrial service is going to explain later on that. Just a rapid consideration. Volume 2 is very important, especially for all related to planet bands, both for space and terrestrial services. Resolutions and recommendations are related to the resolution and recommendation from the conference, and not from I2R. We are going to later on to make the difference. This is the volume 1 content, terminology and characteristics, frequencies, coordination, notification, interference, etc., etc. I'm going to skip it. Some points that are very important to make the difference about the language. It's important to make a difference between resolutions and recommendation issued from the RRCs and contained within the radio regulation, and resolution and recommendations issued from the study groups, naming I2R. Then let's first look at the radio resolutions from the radio regulations and in the I2R. In this case, they come from the World Radio Conference. In this case, it comes from the radio assemblies. They are contained then on the radio regulations, volume 3, and the I2R resolutions, and contained in the book of I2R resolution that you have also access to that on the file of regulatory documents we have provided. We need to update that because now the last version is 2019 as a result of the Radio Assembly 2019. The difference, a resolution I2R is always named resolution I2R. So when you have resolution followed by I2R, it means this is a resolution issued from the assembly related to the study groups. While when you have resolution number and within parentheses you have WRC, is because that resolution is part of the volume 3 on the radio regulations. This is an example, resolution 763, WRC 15. When you don't have the word RIP, it means that it's the very first edition. Then in that case, for example, the resolution 763 is a newer resolution decided during the WRC 15. And resolution 7, it was revised in WRC 03. Then it means that the original edition, the original resolution was created in a conference before. It's quite similar in the case of resolution I2R. We put between parentheses the year. The year corresponds to the year of the radio assembly. Recommendations is also similar. You have recommendation from World Radio Conference or I2R recommendations coming from the study groups. Recommendation is similar here, number within parentheses the year or the $C, while in the I2R recommendation, we had explained it yesterday, you have recommendation, I2R, the serial, according to the topic, number, and version. And this is an example, you see similar here. And for recommendation of I2R, we use a sequential number, score 0, score 2, to indicate the version of that recommendation. So please have in mind this difference between resolutions on and recommendation of the RRCs contained on volume 3 of the radio regulation from I2R resolution of I2R recommendations. Here we put some of examples of it. There's something important to mention is the name I2R recommendation incorporation. Some recommendations are so complete with very well detailed procedures of how to do, for example, analysis for an interference situation and so on, or how to define area coverage, etc., that the conference had decided to incorporate by reference within the radio regulation. That is contained in volume 4. And I'm going to skip a little for you there. Just a minute. Okay. When you open the volume 4, at the end of the volume 4, you are going to find out this table. Cross-reference list of regulatory provisions, including footnote and resolution incorporated in I2R recommendation. This table is very clear, and I'm going to explain. It defines a specific what recommendation and the specific version. In this case, for example, the TF 460 score 6 is not the version 5, is not the version 7. It's a specific that one. And in that part is indicated in which provision or in which footnote is included. It means this resolution is incorporated by reference only in this provision, 114. Whether you find this number in other part of the radio regulation, you are going to find out without the number, and in that case, it's cited as a recommendation, not compulsory. So if ever you have any doubt about this, the recommendation is compulsory or not, please visit this table at the end of the volume 4. Getting back to presentations. Then, as contained on the resolution 27, let me remember 27 or 28, maybe the 28, there's a resolution on the volume 3 explaining specifically how does it work, the incorporation. Then, to indicate that the recommendation is incorporated by reference, we use the expression shall. That's the manner to indicate that the recommendation becomes compulsory for that specific provision. And in that case, the version it will be explicitly indicated. There's no automatic update. What does it mean? Let's say, for example, this recommendation is 476.5, version 5. During the 4 years later, of course, the study group could revise and maybe have new edition of the recommendation version 6, recommendation version 7. And precisely that's why at every conference, one of the topics of the agenda is the revision of the existing recommendation to decide if they are going to update based on that. Then let's say that you had the version 5 and now we had the version 6 or 7, then next conference will decide, and if they accept it, we are going to update this table to say that now the compulsory version is not the version 5, but the version 6 or 7. But please have in mind the incorporation, the update is not automatic, must be decided by the conference. While in the case of a voluntary, we use the expression should or similar, and we don't indicate the version. Then we use most recent version. And in that case, the update is automatic because at the end is a recommendation. Then a very easy tip, if you don't have the number of the specific recommendation, it's because it's not incorporated. And if you have the specific number, it is very likely that it's incorporated. This is some examples. When you visit our website, we indicate that clearly. Let's say in that case, for example, we had a recommendation P 525 score 3. But we had indicated, even if this recommendation version 2 was superseded by the newest version 3, we know this version is the one incorporated by reference. That I'm going to update this presentation because it's very likely that the last conference has decided to update, and on the new version, volume 3, we are going to say that now the incorporated version is the score 3. And this is what is classical on the agenda. They was the agenda to 2019, and it's similar for the agenda 223. To examine the revised I2 recommendation incorporated by reference on the radio regulation communicated by the Radio Assembly, and to decide whether or not to update the corresponding reference on the radio regulation. To update, basically, we are going to accept, we are going to decide that now the incorporated version is not the 2, but the version 3, and similarly. Then in that manner, we are not going to stop the work of the study groups. To better clarify, voluntary, then the most, for an example, on provision 16.6, the most recent version of recommendation I2RS 1139, information, more recent version of recommendation this, incorporated, the type of managed mobile service in the trade shall be as described on this recommendation. Then when applying the provision 19.102, this recommendation is compulsory. But again, be very careful because you need to read very clear the text because not necessarily the word shall is associated to the recommendation. Let's see, for example, here. On the provision 25.6, we say administration shall verify guidance for competency in the most recent version. Then in this provision, we are using the word shall, but not associated to the recommendation, but to an activity. Then here the recommendation is not compulsory. Here the recommendation is voluntary. Then the shall be very clear associated to the recommendation in order to be compulsory. Again, in case of any doubt, please look at the table on volume 4 when you have the complete list. Now let's see some key definitions. Telecommunication, any transmission, emission, or reception designed by any mean of using electromagnetic system. Radio applied to radio waves lower than 3000 gigahertz. Radio communication services, any kind of telecommunication services that use radio waves. Some point by default, later I'm going to explain. By default, as unless otherwise stated, radio communication service refer to terrestrial communications. Station, one or more transmitter or receiver with the purpose of radio communication services. Something important to have in mind, the public correspondence. Public correspondence basically relates to networks providing service to the public. Any telecommunication with the office and station must be by reason of their being at the disposal of the public. Basically, the services for general public. Terrestrial radio communications, any radio communication other than space radio communication or radio astronomy. Space radio communication, any radio communication involving the use of one or more stations. Then it's very simple. When you have on the link the use of satellite, then you have that in case of a space radio communication. If all the link is established on between a station placed in Earth, then you have terrestrial communications. Fixed services, a radio communication between the specified fixed points. Broadcasting services, radio communications service in which the transmission is intended for direct reception for the general public. mobile services, radio communication service between mobile and land station, or between mobile stations, land mobile. I'm going to later to explain that. Land, you have land mobile, maritime mobile, and aeronautical mobile. Then in the case of mobile, it's important to have in mind that when you use the expression mobile within the radio regulation, it encompasses by default the three environments: water, land, and air. Then it means mobile communications could be land, maritime, or aeronautical. If you wish to exclude one of them or to limit, it must be specifically mentioned. Then you must say be aeronautical mobile services to say that it's only for aeronautical purposes, or maritime, or in some case you could find, for example, mobile services excluding aeronautical. Then it means that it's for land and maritime. Now, stations. If one or more transmitted, then please have in mind that the station is not necessarily a single transmitter. It could be a combination of them or receivers to provide a radio communication services. A space station then is something placed above the orbit, place it in orbit around the Earth. Theoretically, the lowest limit is maybe something like 150 kilometers in order to have an object orbiting the Earth. Terrestrial station, and a station affecting terrestrial radio communications, and Earth station. Earth station is a station located either on the Earth's surface or any major portion of the Earth atmosphere, intended for communication with other space stations or satellite. And land station is a station in the mobile service not intended to be used while in motion. I take the occasion to make this revision. On the radio regulation, you have the provision 62, 63, and 69, and English language, you don't have any difficulty with that because the words are absolutely different. You have terrestrial station, air station, and land station. But in Spanish and in French, using the Latin roots of the word, we have quite similar words. In French, we say terre, terrien, terrestre. Talking about French, by the way, I take the occasion to congratulate our friend colleague following the seminar for the National Day. But unfortunately, it's not holiday for us. I'm sorry for interrupting your holiday. And in Spanish, you have terrenal, terrena, and terrestre. So it's quite common to find out a mix of this term creating some confusion. Then, to avoid any confusion in the French or in Spanish, have in mind the following. Terre, or service de terre, or service in español, terrenal, is basically when you don't have a satellite involved on the links. Then not a space. It's not a space, it's basically a terrenal or terre. Land. Land refers to the environment to make a difference between maritime or aeronautical. Then not maritime nor aeronautical is in Francais or in Español, similar terrestre. By the way, please have in mind the maritime is not only really for seas, but for any kind of water surface, including rivers and big lakes. And air station is something associated to make a link between an air and space. Then please be very careful, especially in Francais and Spanish, using terrenal, terrena, and terrestrial. There are no synonyms. They have a very clear definition on the radio regulations.
Joaquin?
Yes.
Before you get too far, there was actually a question that came up, I think maybe 2 slides ago that...
2 slides ago? This one, Radioelectric Services?
No, the one before where you were explaining the table in volume 4. Could you go over when you use the table in volume 4 of the regulations?
Yeah, give me, I need to start sharing here. I need to share that again.
We had Nadine from St. Vincent the Grenadines who was asking. She didn't fully understand when we do or do not use the regulations. I know you were explaining that. No, that's not it.
Let me share again the screen.
I think it was when when you incorporate recommendations.
Yes, let me see.
There was a table that you had.
No, I need to open again. It was on the volume 4, then I need to open again.
Yeah.
Yeah. This one?
I think it is.
Yes. Then again, in volume 4, the volume 4 is named I2R recommendations incorporated by reference. Then basically you have the full text of these recommendations, but just because it will be part of the radio regulation. At the end of the book, or this, at the end of this volume 4, you find out this table. In this table, you summarize specifically and very clear this kind of link to become compulsory. Then we cite the recommendation. Here is listed by number, regardless the series. We list it by number. Mm-hmm. So again, we never repeat a number.
Right.
The title of the recommendation, and here we indicate in which part of the radio regulation occurs that incorporation. Then, for example, we say the recommendation TF 460/6 is incorporated by reference on the provision 144 via this resolution. Why? Because on this provision is cited this resolution, and in those resolution, we make the connection. This other example. Recommendation I2R M 476 score 5 is incorporated by reference in the provision 19.83, 19.96A, and 41.41. Whether you find out this recommendation in any other part of the radio regulation, be sure that first, you are not going to find the reference to a score 5, but only to the reference to this the basic number, and using the most recent version. It's a manner to indicate that in that case, the recommendation is not incorporated by reference. There are very few cases, but anyhow, there are cases to which one recommendation in some cases is only as a recommendation, and in other part is incorporated by reference. Then the message, what I like to pass is, please be very careful. It's not because the recommendation is in the table that becomes incorporated in the whole radio regulation. No, the incorporation is specific for the provisions contained in this column of that table. I guess I answered the question. Did I?
Let me just rephrase it, I suppose. So this table shows you all the recommendations that are incorporated by reference in the radio regulations.
Yes.
It summarizes it for you. Yes. And if you have any doubt about a particular recommendation, you can go to this table and see exactly where in the radio regulations it is incorporated. Yes?
Yes, thanks for your rephrasing, Nigel. That's right. Very clear. Thank you.
And one last thing. There is a further consideration as to whether the specific recommendation, the specific version of the recommendation is incorporated, or whether it is the most recent version.
Yeah. Again, when you incorporate a recommendation, the incorporation must be very specific about what version is incorporated. That's why on this table, we indicate always score 0, score 2, score 1, etc. to indicate the specific recommendation being incorporated. Then let me get back to my presentation, to the example we had made. Share the screen. Where are we? Sorry, we need to get back here. Let me screen. This is an example I have shown. On the version of radio regulation 2016, in that case, because it was approved in 2016. The recommendation from the propagation series P525 score 3. Then, at the conference 2016, or maybe before, the recommendation that was incorporated by reference was the version score 2.
Yes.
And then it means up to the conference 2015, that it was valid because there's no any other version. Then in 2015, it was still valid. Then it means that you find out again this recommendation in the current version of the radio regulation, in the prior version in 2016. Then in 2016, 1 year after the conference, the study group released a newest version, named version 3.
Yes.
And we indicate here that the recommendation was supersede in the sense of the recommendation as a standard, as a reference. But for the application of the radio regulations, it remains that we have put that this recommendation is incorporated by reference. Then during the year 2015 up to year 2019, in case of any discussion, et cetera, and whether an administration needs to apply that, the valid reference was the version 2.
Yes.
What happened in 19? In 19, the conference had reviewed that and asked for updating. It's up to date to decide to do. I very lucky they had made. Then now in the new version of the radio regulation, you are going to find now, we are going to update the table to the version 3. And again, that's why in every agenda of the conference, you find always this. Examine the I2R recommendation and decide whether or not to update the corresponding reference. Maybe some countries don't feel quite comfortable with the update, then, or they say that they need more time to understand the difference between one version and the other. And it could be that it happens that maybe the recommendation could have 1, 2, or maybe 3, one, I exaggerate, at least 1 or 2 prior versions that are still incorporated, but it's not that it's something that we are missing, because the conference had not decided to make the necessary updates. And the other, on the other part, I'm going to explain here. When you use, on the recommendation in this case, the most recent version, in that case, is a recommendation, it's not compulsory. Here on the provision 16.6, we mentioned this recommendation, and as you see, we don't use score 1, score 3, or score 4. We say the most recent version, because here is acting as a recommendation. That's why we use should. While here, for example, in the provision 1902, we use the expression shall be described. Then when applying the provision 19.102, this recommendation is compulsory.
Right.
Is that clear?
I guess so. So when it's compulsory, you must specify the specific version.
Yes. It's a good tip. Mm-hmm. When you find in the radio regulation a recommendation with the specific version, be sure that it's incorporated by reference and it's associated to the word shall. Shall,
right, okay.
But again, in case of any doubt, please refer to the table.
Okay. All right. I think there's a further questions for clarification. One from Jamaica, Malangu Lawson. If the recommendation is incorporated by reference, it means that it is compulsory and not just a recommendation, right?
Yes, exactly.
And go ahead.
But yes, it's compulsory, but be careful, it's compulsory only to the specific provision to which that incorporation was made. It's not that it becomes compulsory on the whole radio regulation. It's only for the specific provision.
Okay. So this is a further question from St. Vincent. Suppose I'm in a position where I'm trying to determine what version of a recommendation should I be using. Should I go to the table 4, to the table in volume 4, or should I go to the most recent version of the recommendation that might be available?
Okay, again.
Suppose I'm trying to figure out which is the appropriate version I should be using.
Yeah, please, again, when you have the most recent version, please use the most recent version, but be sure that when we use this expression, it's because it's not compulsory.
Okay, all right.
It's not compulsory. When you are referring to the shall associated to a specific version, and is duly listed on that table, is because it's compulsory, but it's compulsory for the application's interpretation of the radio regulation.
Right.
And if you have a most recent version, please use the most recent version for other purposes, for your standards, for your analysis, for your software tools, etc., etc. Yeah. So please don't not limit it to use the most recent version. Yes. The study groups are working very, very hard to it.
Right.
Then use the specific version incorporated for reference only when you need to apply the radio regulation to a specific situations.
Yes, okay. All right, so if it is, so you advise we use the most recent version generally, but if I'm in a negotiation and we have to find an agreed reference or an authoritative reference, we must, you know, then you go back to the radio regulation and
whether you need to find to resolve a situation on interference, and for that situation on interference, you need to make some calculations, and those calculations need to use some propagation model. And if the propagation model, as I have, for example, explained, is contained within the radio regulation, you must use the version defined on the radio regulation, not the newest one. The newest one, you must wait to the next conference asking for the necessary update. Yes. Otherwise, use the most recent version without any trouble.
Okay. All right.
Specific application of the radio regulation that is compulsory.
Okay. All right. Thanks. I think that clarifies it.
Thanks a lot for this question because, again, it's very important to clarify that.
Yes.
I insist also in this situation, terrenal, terrena, terrestre, or terrien, terrestre, because, again, it's very common to mix up these terms in Spanish and in French. English, fortunately for English, they don't have any of this trouble. It's very clear, terrestrial, earth, and land. So 3 different words with 3 different roots. They're thrown in French and Spanish because the Latin root, they have this common use.
Yes.
Let's say the services and stations. The radio regulation defines 41 radio services containing in volume 1, section 3, from the 20 to 60. They can group it, if you like, by several features. For example, from link, are we dealing with terrestrial services from air to air, including air, maritime, or nautical? Are they dealing with the space, air to space, or space to space? They also link it about the service area. It's land, sea, or any big water surfaces, or air aeronautical. And also related to use profile. Do they have public correspondence or not? Or they're specialized? Let's say, for example, basically the public correspondence in general, fixed, mobile communication, broadcasting, including satellite service, are more public correspondence. And we had others that are specialized that are not intended to provide to general public, as the aeronautical and maritime services, meteorological, observation of the air, scientific, etc., etc. The radio regulation also defines 52 radio stations. Now, the good question, why do we have 41 radio services and 52 radio stations? Because it's very common that some stations are involving simultaneously more than one services. Some concepts by default to have present on the radio regulation. First, all radio communication services refer to terrestrial communication, otherwise must be specified. For example, when you mean when you find out the radio regulation, fixed, mobile, broadcasting, by default, they are terrestrial. If they are by satellite, that must be specified. Then when you use fixed score satellite, mobile score satellite, broadcasting score satellite, anything involving a satellite to become space services must indicate it with it. Otherwise, by default, they are terrestrial. Fixed services, by default, are placed on land because they plan to use a link between fixed station placed in land. Basically, because maritime services and aeronautical service are basically oriented to ships and airplanes, and by default, they are moving platforms. Then there are more mobile services. Broadcasting services are placed on land, basically, while broadcasting satellite service, of course, they could cover the seas, but something that is, let's say, an added value is not the main target. Mobile service, as explained, by default, it includes the three areas. Otherwise, they need to be clear on the difference. Mobile is aeronautical. It means, for example, it means land and maritime. When you find a mobile service only, it means it could be land, maritime, and aeronautical. Maritime and aeronautical are always mobiles. And fixed station might link mobile services. That's basically the concept of the base station. A base station is fixed, but it supports the service of mobile service to the final user. This is something to summarize this kind of connection. Please disregard that because aeronautical fixed, it doesn't exist anymore. So we need to delete that. But this is the explanation. Mobile includes aeronautical, land mobile, aeronautical, land and maritime. Radio determination includes radio navigation and radio locations, and similar for satellite. We use mobile satellite, radio determination satellite. Now let's take some sensitive points, the special services. We name the radio regulation special services are radio communication services not otherwise defined in this session, carried out exclusively for a specific need or general utility and not open to public correspondence, in order to provide service to the third parties. And we had something that is permanently cited on this discussion is the so named ISM, standing for Industrial, Scientific, and Medical Applications. It's the operation of equipment of appliance designed to generate also locally radio frequency for these purposes. Why is so important that? Later on, we are going to discuss the table of allocations. There's no frequency allocation for ISM because it's not a service. The allocation is made to services, and that is not a service. It's something that a particular use that is allowed is authorized under specific conditions. Then I call the attention on the provision of 1513, administration technical and practical in state to ensure the radiation from equipment using for ISM and outside the band to avoid interference. Then any of this application is authorized but not allocated. We have other concepts that sometimes could be considered a little gray zone. We have the expression designated and identified.
Joaquin,
yes.
Before you go on, there is a question about radio astronomy.
Yes.
Why radio astronomy is not defined as a radio communication service in Article 1? Why is it not defined as a radio communication service?
Radio astronomy is defined as a service. We have the service of radio astronomy. We have all of them within the scientific service. You have here the broadcasting, amateur, radio astronomy, meteorological aid, standard frequency, and time signals.
It says they are not defined.
Part of our grouping services because the following are not defined by the radio group as being part of any group. I'm sorry. Please, I like to clarify. There's no specific group. Here, what we like to show is that a given service would encompass other services. What we say here is the mobile includes aeronautical, land, or maritime. What we are saying, we are not saying that those are not services. We are saying that these services don't have particular case. For example, in broadcasting, we don't have sound broadcasting and TV broadcasting. Of course, national administration and also to recommendation have proposed and national-wise used bands that are allocated within the radio regulation broadcasting, and at your national level, you allocate it to specific TV broadcasting or sub-broadcasting. On the radio regulation, we don't do that. With the radio regulation, we have only broadcasting. Then radio astronomy is actually a service. It's included and it's defined. So thanks for the question, and I guess it's important this precision. What we say here is they are not defined as being part of any group of services. I mean, they are solely defined. They are not split in other services associated.
Okay, don't go yet. I think there's another one. Someone is asking about CubeSats. Carlos Gonsalves. As we know, there are CubeSats related to many known services. In what service are CubeSats included? Okay.
I will let my colleague from the Space Service to answer this question on the days ahead, because that is very, very important. CubeSats, they have a double implication, both before ITU related to the radio regulations and also related to the Commission for Pacific Use of Outer Space from the United Nations, related to object launched to the space. As long as they use frequency, they must comply with the radio regulation. My colleague is going to explain that later on. Then we don't use the word CubeSat, or you don't have high satellite. We use services. Services, any station, place it in orbit, transmitting or receiving signal to or from Earth is considered a space station and subject to the radio regulation. And later on, my colleague, they are going to provide a full detail. Jorge has prepared a very good presentation about that, and it's very important, taking the occasion of the people from academia attending this meeting, to invite them. Please be very careful. This kind of projects are very interesting. It's very good that academia fosters this kind of initiative, but they must comply with national and international regulation, both for use of a spectrum and for object launched to the space.
All right, I will save that question for after the break then. I think you answered about the radio astronomy, so I think I can take off that one. Okay, go ahead.
There are some concepts that you don't find as allocation. You have designated, as is the case for ISN, designated for hubs. Then you don't find, well, it's quite normal that you don't have hubs within the main table of Article 5, because we allocate to service, not a station. The hub is a kind of a station. Yeah, we had identified for high throughput satellites, and the most common case, we identify bands for IMT. You don't find out within the main table IMT, because IMT is a particular application of mobile services.
Right.
Now, there are several questions. Why not creating also a definition for designation or identifying? Well, so far, the spectrum community has considered that it's not yet necessary, even if the identification doesn't have a specific definition with the radio regulation. Is working pretty well, because that identification allows administrations to go further in their national table. I'm going to later explain a little about those details between the radio regulation and the national frequency tables. I'm going to skip that, IMT. Interference, well, this is the classical case. Interference is, for the case of radio regulation, interference is any signal received by this receiver coming from any different stations. Then any case of interference, like intermodulation and so on, caused by created by the transmitter one, is not within the radio regulation. When we deal here with interference, we deal with external interference. It means interference produced by other stations. By default, when we use the expression interference, we refer to harmonic interference. But the purpose of coordination is important to have in mind that within the radio regulation, we have defined 3 levels of interference: permissible, accepted, and harmonic. Permissibly, that's equal the level of interference that you must accept. No communication system is free of interference. All systems must accept any level of interference. It's impossible to have zero interference. That's precisely the state of the art, evolving, having more and more performing technologies that could allow working with higher and higher level of interference. And that's the permissive. Then what happened? If we have two countries with a situation on interference and country A is claiming that country B is interfering, but according to the result of the measures, the level of interference reported is lower than the permissible, then there's no case of interference, because in both country A and B must design the system accepting this level, using this permissible level of interference. Acceptable interference is a trade-off. It's something I agree. It's a little higher than permissible, that in case of coordination, country B, because maybe in country B the service is secondary, then they are going to accept a higher level of interference coming from country A. That's part of an agreement. Important to have in mind that when we have this agreement between country A and B, it cannot be in spite of a country C not involved on those discussions. It's not that we are going to increase the level of interference, but it will affect a country C. In that case, they need to talk the three of them. And the harmful interference. Harmful interference is basically a level that is not acceptable. I mean, the interference level is so high that actually the communication cannot operate. Then, by default, when we talk about interference, we refer to harmful interference, but please have in mind in any coordination procedure that you have these three levels of interference. Harmful interference, some provision, considering the radio regulations, either each member state undertake the required to operate agencies with recognized and other agencies duly authorized for this purpose, for this provision, and all stations, whatever their purpose, must be established and operated in such a manner as not to cause harmful interference to the radio service of communication of other member states. It means every member is responsible of any emission from the territory under the jurisdiction that could affect stations of other countries. Regardless, it's a private, a commercial company, etc., the responsibility of the is basically from the administrations. We have a specific full article of interference within the radio regulation. It's Article 15. My colleague from Terrestrial and Space Service, they are going to make a lot of detail of that during their presentations. Now go to the main, maybe the most, I don't like to say the most important, but one of the main content of the radio regulation is the frequency of the allocation. Then first we need to make a difference between this process: allocation, allotment, and assignment. Allocation basically is when we define that a frequency band will be used for a specific radio communication services. Then we allocate to a service. Allotment is a particular case of using some channels, particularly when we need to make this kind of sharing the resource in order to guarantee the equitable access. My colleague will, later on will refer further to that. And assignment is referred to administration. Then, basically, with the exceptions contained on the allotments on the appendices, basically the radio regulation deal with allocation. Allocation are granted to services, assignment and granted to stations. Of course, they must be consistent, because first you need to allocate to a service. Let's say, for example, you are going to allocate to broadcasting, and once you allocated that back to a broadcasting, you could give the permission, the license, I mean the assignment, to a particular station to operate that service. Then it must be consistent. Then, with the exception, as we have just explained it on some particular cases, in general, the radio regulation doesn't deal with assignment because it's sovereign of administrations. But it's important that the national frequency table be consistent with the radio regulations.
Joaquin?
Yes.
There is a question about the interference levels.
Yes.
This is from Sabagi. Would you please explain what is the difference between infringement and harmful interference? How is there weighting in seeking coordination process? So I don't know if you used the term infringement before.
No.
Someone was asking what's the difference between...
Yeah, we use it 3 words: permissible, accepted, and harmful. Permissible is the level that anyone must accept when you plan and design and bring into use a network. You must accept this level of interference. Harmful interference is the level that is impossible to operate, and accepted is something in the middle that is a result of coordination. Maybe country A has the priority, country B, they arrive later, then maybe it's a secondary server, first come, first server, and during the negotiation, country B, they have said they are going to allow a higher level of interference coming from country A. Then it's agreement between these 2 administrations. It means that maybe will be a little degradation for country B that will be probably have the consequence of having a lower data speed, but anyhow they could operate. While harmful interference, well, nobody's going to accept a level of interference higher than harmful because in practical the system doesn't work. But we use it permissibly, accepted, and harmful interference. Infringement could be that somebody is operating in some level higher than that on a different frequencies, more related to spectrum monitoring.
Okay, so it's not in this context. Okay, thanks. There is another question. I'm not sure which slide is referred to, but is there a difference between designated and identified?
I was expecting that question.
From Fabian.
Yeah. Okay, let me see here.
There you go.
We have made a hand-side research. What we have found out is actually there's not a difference. They decided to use that. We don't know why. I mean, identify is clearly used for high throughput satellites and for INT. What designated is used for ISN and for hubs. We don't know, we didn't find a specific difference. Some people say that it was maybe a mistake. Other people say that maybe it was something that first there were the designation for hubs, and later on they start to make the identification. They like to use a different word to not be included on that. But regardless of use of designated or identify, what is important is every time you find out designation and identify, you'll never find on the main body of the article file on the table. You're always going to find out through the footnotes. And most of the footnote indicates very clear that this designation or identification do not preclude the use of the band to which it was allocated. Then it means not because you are going to identify or designate that you could generate interference to the service to which the band is allocated. But
right.
Just when you use, you find out the word designate and identify, refer to the specific footnote because you'll never find out on the main body. It's always contained through the footnotes. So read the specific footnote because it's important. In some cases, the designation identification on the footnote could maybe differ. Very few cases, but in some cases, the footnote could have some difference.
Right, okay. All right, so I guess that's one that we can carry forward.
Why not to put designation or identification as part of the process, like allocation and so on? Well, so far administrations have considered it not necessary. I remember that in conference 2012, one administration has proposed it, but it was disregarded. It considered that it's not yet necessary.
Okay, another question.
Yes.
Footnote, I guess, 5.241 states that in region 2, 5.241, do you have that there on your thing? No, maybe not, but that footnote states that in region 2, no new radio location service stations may be authorized in the band 216 to 225 megahertz. Stations authorized before January 1st, 1990 may continue to operate on a secondary basis. It seems to me that from the year 1990 to date, the useful life of this equipment has already passed. And since the authorization of new stations of this service is not allowed, there is no reason to continue mentioning this service in this band, the 216 to 225 megahertz. Could you please explain why the radio location service continues to be attributed in this frequency band in region?
Let me check, because we need to check on the newest version of the radio regulation. Then I kindly invite, please visit the document we have provided, the WRC 19 final acts, if whether we have already updated that. But during the transition period, because there is a transition, we need to have that.
Yes, okay. I understand. So your expectation is that at the end of what is considered a reasonable
please write me down that, and I'm going to verify if whether the last conference has updated it.
Right, okay, I'll just hold it until the end or cut it out. All right. Let me take off this other one. So we have two questions going forward, one related to CubeSats and one related to this footnote.
Nigel, we are a little short of time, and we have still a very
yes,
important number of slides. So very kindly, I ask to have the question at the end to go ahead, because otherwise we limit it on time.
Okay.
So, please be a little patient. I'm going to answer the question at the end of the presentation. Anyhow, write your question on the question and answer session. Nigel is going to take care of it, and I'm going to read.
Yeah.
Try to answer. Then please have in mind that allocation are granted to services and assignment to stations. I'm going to show you something. I'm going to stop here. Let me stop sharing. And I like to share now this screen. So do you have at this moment the website, the Merriam-Webster?
Merriam-Webster, correct?
Yes. What I like to show, look at this. I'm looking for the word allocate.
Yes.
And you see here, allocate as synonymous, allot, and assign.
Yes.
And we're talking Merriam-Webster, one of the most, at the top of the top reference for English grammar. What I like to show you is basically that. Please be very careful, because in the common sense, in a common language, assign and allocate are synonyms.
Yes.
But on the context of radio regulation and the content and spectrum management, there are absolutely different processes. And this is a very common mistake we found out in bibliography, in document, and so on. Even experts from the sector used to fall on this error. Please be very careful, especially when you have translated documents, because when you have translated, be human or machine translator, they not necessarily quite familiar. They could use Merriam-Webster as a reference, and they use as synonyms. So please be very careful. Allocation is related to services. Assignment is related to station. Assignment is the licensing, the authorization, permission, whatever, to the user, to the station. Allocation is to the service. So please help us to create this culture and avoid this common confusion. Now some principles and some different maybe are at the national level. The radio regulation is technical neutral. Then we allocate frequency bands to radio communication services. We do not allocate services to specific applications. We do not allocate to particular technologies, and we do not define the user profile. Let's say, for example, you find on the table allocation mobile. You are not going to find the radio regulation cellular network. Or for example, IMT, because IMT is an application of mobile services. We don't have a specific technology with this. We don't say GSM, LTE, WiMAX, etc. There are possible technologies. It's up to the country to decide the standards to be used when they implemented that. And we don't define the profile. We don't see that as for official use, for commercial or particular. On your national table, you are absolutely free to go further. You could say, for example, in broadcasting, and saying they mentioned that the broadcasting for television, broadcasting for sound. You could say that it's mobile, intended for cellular or commercial operators, mobile broadband. You could say this frequency allocated to broadcasting, this portion will be reserved for official use, for governmental use, that for commercial, that for community. You could do it as long as there's no contradiction on the radio regulation. But we have these principles, then that's why you don't find this kind of particularity within the radio regulation. You could have on your national frequency table, as long as you be consistent with these main concepts. Now, very rapidly, the main body, the frequency bands, okay? As you know, the radio regulations, we had split the world into regions. Region 1, Western Europe, Arab countries, and Africa, and also the former Soviet Union countries. Region 2, the Americas. Region 3, Central and Southern Asia, and all the Pacific. One of the advantages of Region 2 is that we don't have land borders with Region 1 and 3, that it reduces the quantity of interference situation. There's more complicated. It doesn't mean that it's not complicated, but even more complicated coordination between Region 1 and 3 than for Region 2. That's one advantage we had in Region 2. Services on the table, we use capital letters for when the allocation is made in a primary basis. And we use normal character, for example, here, fixed or mobile, when we use a secondary. The services are listed in alphabetic order, but be careful, alphabetic order in French. Then that's for what you find that on the radio regulation and English version, you find fixed and broadcasting. Because in alphabetic order in Francais, say fixed et radiodiffusion. Then the order is in French. And the order does not indicate any priority. When you have, let's say, for example, two services allocated in a primary basis, fixed and mobile, for example, both of them in capital letters, is not because fixed is first that they have more priority. There's no more primary than another. Yeah? We have only, first, we listed the primary services, and then we listed below the secondary service. There's a difference between them, but there is not a higher priority between primaries or between secondaries. Primary basis, fix something very interesting on Chinese and Arab version. They don't have capital letters, then we use both characters to make the difference. What's the difference between primary and secondary? Basically, the secondary services have a lower priority vis-a-vis the primary services. Then the primary cannot interfere any service in primary, be in service or in future service. Then the interference is not only to the current network, but also to the future ones, and cannot claim protection coming from primary services. But if somebody is interested to do a secondary service, he's not a sorcerer, he cannot guess what will happen in the future. Then that's why it's so important that regulatory agencies take care of the planning of all the primary service. Then in that manner, all the community will be aware, not only what is currently in use, but what is planned to be used on the future. Then in that manner, we guarantee there is no interference for the future use. On the other hand, secondary service, they can claim protection against future secondary service. Then again, secondary, primary, they are all equals, no priority between them, all have the same rights. Secondary, with respect to primary, no interference, no protection. Secondaries shall not interfere, shall not claim protection. But secondary can be protected vis-a-vis other secondary in a first come, first served basis. Something we have illustrated here. Now, this is the table. You could be quite familiar on the Article 5. We have the split by region, colon, region 1, region 2, and region 3. We have then here the frequencies. Now, you know the frequencies are in kilohertz or megahertz because normally in the upper part of the page, you find out the frequency range. Here, you see, for example, is the ideal situation is allocated to maritime mobile in a primary basis and exclusive manner. It's not shared with any other services. That's the ideal work for that services, but it's impossible to do that on the spectrum. In most of cases, you have this. Here, for example, you have mobile, aeronautical, radio navigation in a primary basis for region 2. And for region 3, you have, for example, this service, aeronautical mobile and land mobile in a secondary basis. Now, when you have a full node in front or just below that service, it means that the full node is related only to the service. Then full node, this full node 79, 98, 84 are related only to maritime mobile, while the full node on the bottom part of the box, it could be related to several services. Then it means that the full node could affect both radio navigation and fixed. It could be maybe because we like to include something additional. Here we say primary, organized by alphabetic order, and secondary. First the primary, then the secondary. What happened with the full nodes? The full node must be very precise. The full node has some exceptions to indicate that some countries or a given country wishes to do in a different manner. We need to indicate the area of countries, the frequency range, the type of allocations we like to make, and the service to be modified, and also indicate the restrictions. Case 1, for example, no restriction. We have an additional location. We said in China, that's the country, the band, you see which frequency bands, is also allocated. When we say this also allocated, it's because it's additional. It means they are going to consider all the content of the box, but in addition, they like to allocate the aeronautical radio navigation on a secondary basis. As there's no restriction, it means that any potentially affected country must accept that in China, the frequency can be used for a secondary basis. In general, when you include this for a secondary basis, there's not a big problem because precisely because it's secondary. So in secondary, the primary will have also the priority. But in general, when you have something related to primary basis, you have this consideration. For example, here we said in Monaco, similarly, also allocated to land mobile service on a primary basis, subject to the agreement obtained under 921. It means that they need to agree with other countries for this primary basis. In other words, what does it mean? That these services, land mobile service, Monaco can use in a primary basis, but whether they need to coordinate with other countries, this primary basis will be not recognized because it will be based on the main table of the frequencies. Then it's very important when you have the full node to know if you have this agreement or not. I mean, there's or not, there is there or not a restriction. And that is why it's so important when we go into the radio conference, because during the radio conference, when you define these revisions, and if you didn't go to a given conference and a given country put a full node and the full node, there's not this restriction, it means that you had accepted that to that country. That basically the 921, the request for coordinations. Then the different type of full nodes, different category of services. It means that you have the same service as on the main table, just that you like to change the category. But please have in mind that this change is valid only in the area of that country, not for the rest of the countries. For example, here, this service, you could see we have mobile except aeronautical, and is allocated in a secondary basis. But as you see here, we see that on through this full node, different category of service sorry, we had dealing with fixed service. Here we have fixed, is secondary. But this group of countries asked that in their territories, it will be fixed and mobile will be allocated on a primary basis. And there's no restriction. It means any country that have a situational interference related to a fixed service that like to coordinate with any of these countries on the list, they have accepted that on that country, that the service for those countries will be primary, then having the priority. Additional allocation is something that you want to include. For example, here in region 3, you have fixed and mobile as a primary, but to this footnote, we say additional allocation, but in these countries, Australia, China, etc., is also allocated to broadcasting service on a primary basis. That means on the table for, when you are going to read this table, for countries as Australia, China, Korea, Philippines, etc., you are going to put fixed, mobile, and broadcasting, only for those countries. And we have alternative allocation when you do something different. For example, here, this frequency is allocated on region 2 and 3 for amateur as a primary basis. But to this footnote, those countries, instead of using for amateur, they're going to use for fixed, mobile, on broadcasting. As you see, the table fine is plenty of footnotes. Of course, we understand that it reflects the particular needs of countries, of a group of countries, but on the other hand, it creates a problem of the harmonization, because the more footnotes we have, the harder it is to find out our harmonizations. Then the no harmonized allocation, it means there could be a different service per region, some we could primary or the secondary. Then the spirit of the radio regulation is looking for a harmonization as possible. Then that's we have the recommendation 34, recommends that future conference should, whenever possible, allocate frequency band on a worldwide basis, is possible. Should, wherever possible, keep the number of footnotes in Article 5 to a minimum. And that's also why on the agenda of every radio conference, we invite countries to revise the footnotes if necessary to delete their subscription and reducing this quantity of exception. Then this is the manner we are going to link a spectrum harmonization at national level. You had a process on the conference. You could have a regional plan, the frequency identified by or defined by a conference. Then you must go that to implement this decision at your national level, through national standards, through national roadmaps, national refarming, where you need to modify a band that it was allocated to a given service and you need to reallocate and give the national license. And according to your national realities, you go to the next conference with your national proposals to identify new allocations and new identification and so on. Something very important, we have in mind all the time these red books, but we used to forget that we have the complement, the rule of procedures. Please be careful, the rule of procedure are part of the radio regulations. The rule of procedure is a complement of the radio regulation by providing clarification of the particular application of the regulation for specific cases. The rule of procedure are revised during the radio regulation board meetings, precisely at this moment. I mean, it's not they are going to revise every time, but if they need to do it, they can do it. They could revise these procedures. And the problem we have is that there's no explicit. Let's say, for example, on the radio regulation, you had the provision 4.5. There's no animation here that there's a rule of procedure, but when you go to the rule of procedure, you have that. Say, when you are going to apply the provision 4.5, you must have in consideration these items. Then it means, please, you must have both documents, the radio regulation and the rule of procedure, being sure that very provision have that. We have developed a PDF version, named the radio regulation browser. Unfortunately, I have a problem with the license. Then in the next day, I will ask my colleague for a little time to present it. When we develop a navigator that allowed that, and within the navigator, what we had done on the PDF version, we put a hyperlink here. So every time you have a hyperlink, it's a manner to indicate, please be very careful because there's a rule of procedure. And when you click on the hyperlink, you go directly to the rule of procedure. But if you have the paper version or not that version, please, every time you like to apply the radio regulation, be sure, verify if whether there is or not associated to it a rule of procedure. The rule of procedure, we could revise, for example, the last version is the rule of procedure according to the last conference and to the radio regulation in force now, 2016. And during this 4 year, they had made 5 revisions. Then the radio regulation, don't worry, once you have the version 20 or 21, it will be valid until the next conference. You don't need to revisit. There's no update because it's only decided by the conference. On the other hand, we invite you to decide the revisit maybe every 3 or 4 months or website looking for possibly updates of the rule of procedures. I'm going to skip that about very fast about the International Master of International Frequency Register because my colleague, they are going to explain that in detail. Basically, when you need an international recognition of your station, you must register to gain that. But to do that, you must comply with the radio regulation. Is that precisely what our colleagues from Terrestrial and Space Service do, verifying that you comply to that to be registered. And once you have it registered, you gain international recognition. It means protections. But the protection cannot be in a strap. You cannot protect a station if you don't know where it is and how it's operating. At your national level, you have the National Spectrum User Database, and internationally, we have this I2 Master International Frequency Register. Whether you need to resolve any particular situation, if you are at your national level, you apply your national rules. At the international level, we apply the radio regulation and the rule of procedures. Please have in mind that my colleagues later on, they are going to explain for the detail what to register or not. Basically, if your station is not potentially subject to be interfered or cause interference to other countries, you don't need to register. Then you don't need to register anything. Briefly, my colleagues also to refer later on. Then for coordination, please have in mind, we can participate, we are part when there are involved several administrations. A matter, a situation of interference between these networks, 1 and 2, if they are placed within the same territory under the same jurisdiction of country A, we are not going to intervene. Maybe if country A invite us to provide some advice, we could provide advice, we could provide some support to the process, but basically it must be ruled through the national database and national regulation. We could intervene when one of the interference is placed in the territory of other country. In that case, we are going to use the database, the Master International Frequency Register, and we are going to apply the rule of procedure. And that's quite very important. If you are not registered, we cannot guarantee any protection. We cannot protect what is not duly registered because the other countries don't know about it.
Joaquin,
yes.
Jorge is telling me we're over time.
Yes, I'm about to finish. Just how
much more are you going to add? Okay, all right.
Then license, very important. No transmission station must operate without license. And I'm going to refer a particular case of interest, the so-called unlicensed devices. We use these unlicensed devices, unlicensed spectrum, licensed set, etc. These terms are very useful for the common language, but please have in mind that from the regulatory point of view, every station needs a license. Every device using a spectrum needs a license. What we use is that in that particular case, the particular user, they don't need to ask for a specific license because that license has already provided to this generic use authorization or blockade license or equivalent name. What means the regulator must provide the rules saying these bands, we authorize the use of these devices under the condition that they operate following these conditions. Then it must be interpreted that this could operate in a free fashion. They cannot modify that. If you had an authorization for use devices, for example, for a Wi-Fi, saying the maximum is 100 milliwatt output power, You cannot be a very smart engineer and using a 1 watt to increase the coverage area because you are infringement. That's an infringement, what you asked of this recommendation. So please, the message for administrations, you need to provide a general license for this kind of devices. And other point, unlicensed devices must operate in a non-interference, non-protection basis, but please be careful. They are not secondary, because secondary, they are protected against future users. Here, you don't know who are using, then there's no protection, not only vis-a-vis other services, but within them. I mean, two Wi-Fi hotspots, they are not protecting each other. They must talk each other in order to duly operate without interfering each other, because there's not any priority. You cannot say my hotspot has arrived first, then I had the priority to use this channel, you must switch off yours. Then there's no priority. Then they are not secondary. If you like, they could be known something lower than secondary, but there are no secondary services. And very important, again, having the clear set of rules on how to operate it. And microsatellites, I skip that because my colleagues is further to refer in more detail to it. Then we have this 3 levels, basically planning, licensing, and monitoring and enforcement. I skipped that, but basically we start with the difference between primary and secondary. At your national level, you could do less than on the radio regulation. Maybe on the radio regulation, we put broadcasting and mobile satellite. Maybe in your table, you put only broadcasting. It's up to you to have less. But if you have more, or in addition to do it, it's important to have that to the full note, so the rest of the world, the rest of the country know how are you doing. This is an important table for the planning. At national level, you have the national table of frequency allocation, and international level, we have the Article 5. It's important that your national table be consistent with this international one. Licensing, you have national spectrum data use. We have our master frequency for international protection. Monitoring, you have national system of monitoring. At the international level, please refer to Article 16. We have the international monitoring system, basically the cooperation between among several administrations wishing to cooperate to create this big network of international monitoring, but it's not performed by us. And enforcement, we have the national regulator, we have the IT Radio Communication Bureau, and if you like to appeal, you have the Radio Regulation Board, but we don't have really an, let's say, an enforcement. We don't have policy, we don't have the blue helmet to go there. We cannot intervene. We could put in knowledge, we could say, country B, you are in a clear violation of the radio regulation, but we cannot go beyond. We operate, the radio regulation is applying a good faith principle. Fortunately, we had very, very few cases of this, and on the recent year, these very few cases have been resolved. Well, these tools is what I like to show later on because I had a problem with the license, and later I'm going to present. And that's basically my presentation. Sorry for my delay. We are a little out of time. If we maybe a little time for some questions.
I think we should take the break now. And okay. What I'll ask Joaquin is that you will be staying on for the full morning. So yeah. I'll line up the questions, try to get through the next presentation, and then we'll come back to the questions. The questions are saved.
What I can try to do is also to answer by written, by testing on the question and answer chat.
Yes, you can answer. You can type the answers in the question and answer section as might be required. So yeah, okay. Let's say we take the break now, and we'll break for 10 minutes.
Okay.
And we will resume at 10 minutes before 11 our time. So that's really in about 11 or so minutes.
Okay. Right? Thank you very much.
Let's take the break now, and we'll be back shortly. All right, folks. Thank you for coming back. We will resume now with the next segment of our presentations. I believe the presenter is going to be Mr. Jorge Chico Rossi from the Satellite Services section of the Radio Communication Bureau. And I'll hand over now to Jorge for his presentation. Jorge?
Yes, thank you, Nigel. Do you hear me well?
Yes, I hear you.
Perfect. Good morning to everyone in the Caribbean region and the Americas region, and also good afternoon and good evening for other participants that they are connected from different regions. It is a pleasure for me to participate in this seminar. We really see very interesting questions and also very intensive participation, which in a way is proving that the importance of these seminars also. We are trying to do our best to respond to these questions. So, as you mentioned, now we are going to start to see some results from the WRC 19. I will open a first presentation, show the screen.
Right.
Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Perfect. So, what we're going to see now is exactly the key or main WRC 19 outcomes in terms of space issues. So if we want to say where is the outcome, we can summarize basically in one book, which is the one that we are seeing on the top left side, which means the final acts of the WRC 19. As you know, there has been 4 years of studies during the study groups, cycles, and finally 1 month of discussions in the WRC in Sharm el-Sheikh last year. After that, the radio regulation was updated in its 4 volumes, which normally is trying to be simplify a little bit, but normally there are more and more resolutions. And for that, we are going to see now more in details all the resolutions and specific questions that they were addressing. But before that, I would like to give you in a short slide some numbers in terms of what the WRC 19 meant in terms of debates and outputs as well. So we dealt with 16 specific agenda items plus 20 more issues on general services. We counted with more than 3,400 participants from 163 countries and 129 entities. But moreover, the outcome of this was reflected in 52 new resolutions and 51 modified resolutions. So this is just to give you an introduction of the amount of work which was done during the 4-year preparatory work plus the month of discussions. And now we are going to see a bit of what are the WRC 19 achievements. Certainly, it modified, updated the radio regulations based on the needs that they were presented during these years. So all the stakeholders met, and always based on consensus. They modified the radio regulation in order to provide a stable and predictable regulatory environment. And why? Well, because we know that when there is a stable and predictable regulatory environment, the investments may come or will come, no? And by doing so, we will benefit of these new radio communication systems, which also are going to protect the incumbent system that we are having now. So at all times with this, the conference tried to find a proper balance in terms of global harmonization, but also giving a bit of margin for flexibility in terms of spectrum allocations. No? Again, the idea is to accommodate these new services that they will be useful for the citizenship, but at the same time to protect the incumbent radio communication services. This is in one shot the main achievement or the main goal. To go into details, so the first agenda item we are going to present, in fact, is the item related to SIMS or Earth Station in Motion, which also created a lot of work and discussion during the preparatory work and also, of course, during the conference. Related to SIMS, the idea of a SIM was to have again, a regulatory and operational and technical conditions, which would allow a SIM to operate, but also protecting another services, no? And they obtain 2 GHz of capacity, and by obtaining this regulatory framework, all the administrations, ITU members, can count on an international framework that they know they can use when they have to provide the licenses or authorizations, but also to protect the other services, no? And when they have to operate these systems. So in summary, they will provide broadband connectivity to maritime services, either on board of ships, but also on board of aircraft for what is called aeronautical SIM, and on land, no, vehicle. The resolution which was achieved in this resolution, in this conference, in terms of SIMs, is the 169, and it contains a lot of details. However, those that we can put emphasis now are those related to the protection of another system, for example, for the protection of NGSO in the FSS, in the uplink in 27, 28 gigahertz, which basically it takes into account the off-axis ERP density limits as a hard limits, but also for the NGSO in the MSS feeder links in the 29 gigahertz range, also providing some operational characteristics. These are listed in the Annex 1 and Annex 2 of the Resolution 169. With regards to the terrestrial services in the 27.5, 29 gigahertz band, Annex 3, there are also some limits to protect these services. For example, from the maritime SIMs, there is a minimum distance from the low water mark, and also there is a maximum ERP spectral density towards the horizon. By applying this limit, it is considered that the terrestrial services are protected. In terms of aeronautical SIMs, there is a maximum PFD at the Earth surface, which is based on the arrival angle and the altitude, no? And also there are some out-of-band emissions for adjacent bands. On the other hand, in the downlink, the SIMs also should not claim protection from the NGSO FSS, which are operating in the 17.8 to 18.6 gigahertz, and the BSS feeder links operating in the 17 gigahertz band as well. So this is basically what we are mentioning for the SIMs, which, as I said, was a very important issue as well. And another agenda item here for the NGSO satellite system, we have in fact 3 or 4 agenda items related to, but certainly the NGSO satellite system were some of the highlights of the conference, together with another terrestrial system like IMT. In this case, we can put the emphasis on 3 or divide in 3 different topics. The first one is constellation, which are currently being deployed in KU and K bands. Also about new constellation plan in Q and B bands. And the third one is another kind of constellation, but also very much emerging, which are the short duration missions, no? And I heard some question about CubeSats in the panel before, so we can answer at the end of this presentation. So from the ITU side, we are witnessing, let's say, an increasing amount of satellite networks being submitted for notification, and satellite networks, satellites launched, which have a kind of slightly exponential projection, as we can see on the right bottom side of the screen. The first agenda item we are going to speak more in detail is the one which was called agenda item 7 issue A, which was dealing with the milestone-based approach, and obtained a resolution number 35. The background is that, well, before to embark in a project of these dimensions, as we are also seeing during this year that it's not so easy, there was a need to have a regulatory framework which allows that these projects will be launched, but certain complying with certain mechanisms for coordination notification, but also to ensure that there is not a spectrum warehouse, and finally all these satellites will be deployed. So bear in mind many of these questions, but also considering that there is a need of small flexibility in terms of orbital parameters and some tolerance, which will be discussed during this next study cycle. There was this resolution adopted, and the Article 11 was modified for bringing into use. Concerning the tolerances, as I said, it's going to be studied during the next study cycle in the working party 4A. There is already a correspondence group which is working on that. So we'll see more in detail what this is the resolution speaking about. The resolution certified says that this milestone-based approach is applicable to NGSO in the FSS, MSS, and BSS in the listed frequency bands, which are starting from 10.7 gigahertz, KU, up to Q and B band. The idea is that once the 7 years of the regulatory framework for coordination notification has been expired, there would be 3 milestones that they have to comply with in order to satisfy this resolution. These milestones are to deploy 10% of the constellation in the first 2 years, to deploy 50% of the constellation in the first 5 years, and to complete the deployment 100% in 7 years. By doing this, it will be ensured that the coordination notification mechanisms of the radio regulation are respected. Also, there is not spectrum warehousing. And finally, the MIFR will reflect the actual deployment. We have to say that in the VR, we are already working, of course, with this online software. We decided the best is the online format, and it will be available, we expect to be available by the end of this year, before the next year. So this is the interface that shall be used to submit this milestone-based approach. So if we go in terms of timings, we are not going to, for a matter of time, we are not going to go to details, but just to give you an idea, there are basically 3 scenarios here. The first scenario is when the 7 years of the provision 1144 expires before the 1st January 2021. So we see on the left side that the notification satellite network was notified, was brought into use. It arrived to the 7 years deadline, and the 2021 started later. So all the milestones will be counted from this 1st January 2021. So we'll have 2 years for the 10%, another 3 years for the 50%, and another 2 years to complete. In the meantime, there are different deadlines to submit the annexes 1 to the VR using this new online software, and also some reminders from the VR side and publication. No? So this is basically the time frame for the first scenario. The second scenario is when these 7 years expires after the 1st January 2021, and again, we have a notification of a satellite network, bringing it into use, and the 1144 deadline. And from here, again, it will count. And this will depend when this 1144 will fall in time. So again, we have the first milestone, second milestone, and third milestone. And we could call milestone 0 perhaps to the end of the 7 years period, 1144. This is what they have to comply with. And there is also a possibility of modification. And for that, it's only possible if this complies with certain characteristics, like 1131, of course, a commitment that there is no causing more interference, neither claiming protection, and only certain parameters can be modified, not all of them. The third scenario is a very special situation, which is subject to a waiver, and it's only for the case of the 7 years expired between 1st January 2021 and 28th of November 22. And in this case, if the first milestone is not achieved, so the administration can request a waiver, but it has to provide certain information in the Annex 2 of the resolution, which will be submitted to the VR, and then continue with the process to the RRB, and then to report to the VRC23. But this is a very special case. So until now, we have spoken about the milestone-based approach for the NGSO satellite network, which we're discussing under Agenda 7.8. Now we are going to continue with the non-GSO, but in this case for the Q and B band, which was agenda item 1.6, which came because with the evolution in terms of technology, in particular for the terminals and antennas, and also the need for higher capacity, it is foreseen that more satellite networks in higher bands are going to be deployed. And for that, there was a need, of course, of the regulatory framework for the same reason that we mentioned before in terms of stable framework will attract investment and therefore the citizens can benefit of these new services. So for that, it was developed this new regulatory framework in order to allow the sharing between NGSO system and other services, and also to protect the incumbent GSO networks. So this resolution, which are basically 3 resolutions, in fact, the first one was addressing the case of the NGSO system, which were already submitted for notification before the end of the WRC, and they were not subject to coordination yet, because the coordination was just introduced in this WRC. So in those cases, the resolution 771 says that it's okay, but they have to bring it into use in the following 3 years. Let's say before 23rd of November of 2022. This is in alignment with provision 1125 of the radio regulation, no? And also with the idea in mind of preventing spectrum warehousing. The following resolution is the resolution 770, which introduce and also the introduction, sorry, of the coordination under 912 and 912A, no, which was not the case before. So we have the modification to the Article 9, we have the resolution 770, and also protections for the exploration satellite services in adjacent bands and radio astronomy in passive bands, which were modifying the resolution 750. In terms of protection criteria, the criteria which is used here is different than the one which was used before for the KU band and C band and KA band. In fact, here it is used in the modification to Article 22 and the new resolution 770. This introduces the concept of measuring the variation of time allowance associated to the C2N and also to the spectral efficiency for different GSO reference links. This is explained in detail in the resolution 770. And this is done for 2 different cases. For a single entry, which means for one NGSO system affecting a GSO, geostationary satellite network, but also for the aggregate, which is for all the NGSO systems affecting the GSO network. In addition to this, which we are also speaking about Q and B bands, there is also a consultation group to coordinate the aggregate interference in order to protect the GSO satellite networks from this multiple NGSO satellite system. And this is detailed in the resolution 769. Now we are arriving to the third case of NGSO, which is the case of short duration mission satellites. And this is somehow linked in a way with the question that it was posed before for CubeSat. CubeSat, as you know, there is no definition of CubeSat in the radio regulation. As my colleague was saying before, the radio regulations aims to protect any service or to try to operate free of harmful interference. And any station, any space station, which is launched and operated, no matter the size or the mass, should be operated in that manner, no? So it doesn't matter if it is a CubeSat, which there is no definition in the radio regs, but commercially it is understood as a satellite with a mass of 1 kilogram and a volume of 10 centimeter per 10 centimeter per 10 centimeter, for example. Or it can be even bigger, no, depending on the different categories, smaller satellites, etc. But in all the cases, they cannot create harmful interference, and they are subject to the same regulations. Nevertheless, because of the evolution in the technology and the also affordability for these kind of satellites, there was a need to try to identify some frequency band for telemetry and telecommand and facilitate the procedure. But again, to answer the previous question, we can see it later, but there is no specific band for CubeSat. Every band is for a specific service. Normally, the CubeSats, which are experimental or they are from university sometimes, they tend to use amateur satellite band or also combined with, for example, Earth exploration satellite services, and in some cases can be MSS for narrow bands like IoT. These are the typical services, but they should use the frequency bands which are located for those services. In addition to that, of course, they need space operations, and these resolutions 660 and 32 try to give some consideration, technical and procedural, to facilitate these cases only for those which are considered as short duration mission. We'll see later the details, and they cannot be used for more than 3 years. No? So the aim at the beginning was to obtain these advantages to facilitate the notification process, but we will see also that even though there were some positive sides from these resolutions, there are also some restrictions of those cases. So finally, the notifying administration will have to indicate to the VR if it is a short duration mission or not, and based on that indication, the VR will proceed. So the first scenario is the downlink in 137.38 megahertz. In this case, now the coordination is not applicable under 911A, but the restriction is that they should not cause harmful interference, neither claim protection to or from primary services. In addition to that, the PFD at the surface should be below or equal to minus 140 dB watt per square meter and 4 kilohertz of reference bandwidth. So these are the conditions for the downlink. In resolution 32, you will see some more details, like for example, the validity is 3 years, as I said, not subject to coordination, typical mass 100 kilograms or less, and there is a special procedure of fast publication by the VR, etc. If we go to that link, it's even a more interesting case, 148, 149.9 megahertz. Again, the 911A coordination does not apply. Coordination of their station and the 917 or 918 still applies. And there is also a restriction in terms of shall not cause an acceptable interference, neither claim protection to or from existing primary services. Another interesting point is that it shall ensure that the PFD does not exceed certain value for more than 1% of the time at the border of certain territories of certain countries. If it is exceeded, then 921 agreement shall be obtained. So this is the new scenario for those small satellites called short duration missions. And as I mentioned, the administration shall indicate to the VR if it is falling in this category, and then we will proceed with that. From the procedural point of view, there are some modifications, like for example, the process is API plus notification, and the notification shall be submitted after it was brought into use, but not more, yes, that's true, but not more than 2 months after the date of bringing into use. The VR will proceed and will do the examination not more than 4 months. And I must say that also we are already proceeding within these 4 months for any NGSO not subject to coordination today. We have done some efforts to align, and based on that, we can do. Finally, I think for the NGSO, we are done, but we will move or we'll come back to GSO. Another agenda items which were also discussed and were of benefit in particular of developing countries was the modification to Appendix 30, 30A, and 30B for BSS and FSS plans. In this case, WRC 19 noted that some countries, in particular developing countries, which are not using the plans, had the reference situation degraded up to one point that they cannot use it, and therefore they made some modifications, introducing special procedures in order to allow them to use to make use of the plans. For the case of Appendix 3038, there are new orbital slots open up for broadcasting satellite services under certain conditions. No, as I said, that they have the reference situation degraded. Also, this is only for once. It's not for many applications, and for certain window of time. And the same for 30B, with a special procedure in terms of priority. So this is in one screen the main modifications to the plans or advantages from this WRC. And there are plenty of another outcomes, which for a matter of time we couldn't list here, but certainly the introduction of additional global maritime distress and safety systems was one of the other agenda items very much discussed. Finally, there was an upgrade to primary allocation for this service in the 1.6 gigahertz band, and also the inclusion in the Appendix 15 under space under safety services for both up and down links. So there is an additional system, which I think is Iridium, which was introduced here. Another improvements were certainly regulatory procedures and implementation by VR. Another proposal was the introduction of the coordination arc of plus or minus 8 degrees for MSS in the 19.7 to 10.2 and 29.5 30 gigahertz in K band. So by doing this, the coordination procedure was proved that it was enough by having this window without applying the lateral overT as in the past, only in case of 941. And another improvement was also the case of commenting at network level by administration, which is going to be allowed from now on. And another very important, which was also, in fact, a suggestion from the Bureau. The Bureau every conference explained to what happened during these 4 years in terms of activities and difficulties. And through the BI Director's report, can make suggestions to improve the procedures. And in this case, one of the suggestion was to improve the way it is being submitted, the information, and analyzed in terms of C2I when coordination is between two GSO networks. So from now on, administration notifying a satellite network can specify the status of coordination at network level, meaning coordination complete with this or that network, not only administrations. And then this will be taken into account when the VR is doing the analysis under LM32A. By doing this, in fact, the accuracy of the result of this examination is improved, and the findings will be more favorable, let's say. So this was endorsed, and there were also some other suggestions that they were endorsed by the WRC. I think we are arriving at the end. We have more decisions, but basically these are perhaps the most highlighting ones. Also, there is some ERP limits for their stations in the 400 megahertz and new parameters for the Appendix 4 for non-GSO and some timings. Maybe it can look a little bit short, but let's say that for 4 years of studies and 1 month of debates in the WRC, well, this is what we can present in 20 minutes time. So certainly there were intensive discussions, and I am available for further questions then during the session.
Thank you very much, Jorge. There is a question. You talked about the NGSO milestones for the launches of the systems from what, 2 to 7 years. And there is a question from Jose Viveros Roa. He is asking, for sure the pandemic that we are experiencing will delay some of the milestones for non-GSO systems. Is ITU considering this, or are you looking at this at all?
That's a very interesting and very appropriate question for this time, let's say. In fact, yes, if you look at the public information, we have seen that there are different news during this period, and some of them are allocated to the COVID impact. But this is not only for non-GSO, I would say. This can be extrapolated for the GSO and some other systems as well. For the time being, the ITU has no specific mandate to do any extension. If there is a case, it should be submitted to the Radio Regulation Board. And as I mentioned, it's not only for one system, it should be examined on case-by-case basis by the Radio Regulation Board, and then the Bureau will apply consistently. But as far as I know, there is no case submitted yet asking for that. The Radio Regulation Board is meeting just right now. In fact, this is the reason why I'm presenting this presentation, because the chief of the department,
yeah, I was looking at it.
Is busy now in that meeting. So, but for the time being, there is nothing on that sense, but it may come.
Okay. I understand that the pandemic is a relatively new occurrence, so we would have to wait and see to a certain extent, and it's good that the ITU, of course, already has this on its radar. I'm not seeing other questions specific to your presentation. Let me check. Is Joaquin, are you still there available?
Yes, I had just answered the question through the Q&A board. Just I missed one. Maybe it could be the occasion to ask to Jorge. There was a question. I say that you could answer later on during your presentation. It's about the possible delays on the notification procedure for bringing into use for non-geo constellation, having in mind the pandemic situation. But maybe you could answer that at the good time during your presentation next days, or do you rather prefer to do it now?
Well, he answered about the pandemic. I was wondering if there were questions left over from your session that we could address.
I have already answered all the questions on the panel, on the question and answer panel. If ever there's something else, I don't know, but maybe it could be later once we finish the presentation, because I don't like to consume time from the next presentation. Only we will have time, we could take care.
Okay, so you have another presentation after Jorge.
Yeah, I think it's my presentation, Nigel.
Yes. Okay, it's Nikolai.
Yeah.
Okay, well, all right, Nikolai, you can go ahead now.
My name is Nikolai Vasiliev, and good morning to all participants. I'm colleague of Jorge, but I work in terrestrial side of Radio Communication Bureau. Just before starting presentation, I just came from this so-called Radio Regulation Board, which normally consider the cases of extension and delay the date of bringing into use. In fact, they have one document, general question from Germany. The question was if COVID can be considered as reason for such extension. And the answer was that extension normally is given when the case meets 4 conditions of so-called force majeure. And the board came to conclusion that 2 out of 4 conditions for force majeure are met by COVID situation. So it was unforeseen, inevitable, irresistible. But for every specific case, the board will have to check 2 other conditions. And one of the conditions, if the COVID situation was the real reason for delay in bringing into use or not. So there is no general answer, yes or no, but there are some indications that COVID can influence. And if COVID is causing really the delay in bringing it to use, this delay can be granted by the Radio Regulations Board. So this comes from RRB, and now I can start with results maybe for terrestrial services. Do you see the presentation or not yet?
Yes, it's up. What
Okay.
you can probably do is right. Put it in.
You can see it, yeah?
Put it into slideshow mode though.
Yeah, okay. So I will briefly speak about results for terrestrial services at the conference. And I will start with so-called broadband issues. The spectrum and regulations for technologies which provide broadband. These are IMT, international mobile communications hubs, high altitude platforms, RLAN or Wi-Fi.
Right, Nikolai, we are seeing your presenter's view rather than the slide filling the whole page. I don't know if there is maybe in the display settings you could put it to presentation or something like that. But what we are seeing is like the main slide and
if I click like that, do you see it? Or still the same?
No, now we're not seeing the slide at all. So the last one was better. At least we could see the slide, but you know.
My real apologies for it.
Yeah, right now it's just right. So this we can see the slide, but it just doesn't fill the whole page. So it's doable.
Yes, Nikolai, click hide presenter view.
Hide presenter view.
Where's the button?
Just higher up in that same box. That same box that same drop down box that you have there. Yeah. There is hide presenter view. Just
okay, this one.
Right. Yes.
So we succeeded. Now it's okay. I understand. Yeah.
Right. Now we're seeing it fully.
Okay.
Yes.
So the largest agenda item, most complicated, was 113. This is spectrum for 5G or IMT 2020 in ITU terminology. And 5G is intended to provide very high data rates. These data rates are needed to enable augmented reality, virtual reality, transmission of UHD video on smartphones and other applications. So for such high data rates, this technology needs very large bands. And these large bands naturally can be looked at in the higher frequency ranges, so-called millimeter bands, which have very huge capacity. And in addition, they are very, I would say, suitable for small cells, MIMO antennas, beamforming techniques, which enable 5G. So the conference considered totally 11 candidate bands in the range 24 to 86 gigahertz. And the challenge, of course, was how to protect existing service. So IMT was newcomer in these bands, but these bands were already heavily used by other services. And one of the critical services was so-called passive services, Earth exploration and space research service. They were in adjacent band, but they were very sensitive. For example, these are sensors located in space, which collect information about weather and then transmit free of charge to all nations and all countries. So these services has a very big social value, and that's why conference put special focus on protection of these bands. As a result, WC19 identified 5 bands out of 11 candidate bands, and total spectrum was 17.25 gigahertz. So what was important also achievement that Earth exploration, this passive service adjacent, was protected by outband emission imposed on IMT. This is done in 2 steps. Why 2 steps? Because right now the number of 5G stations is not so big. but they are gradually deployed, and when the number will become large, they can create aggregate interference which may hit these passive services. So the limits for IMT, they become more stringent after 1st September 2027. There was no change in 6 other candidate bands. They're listed here. You can see them here. Because of either there's no compatibility with existing services or they are designated for other usage. It was quite important decision because it gave spectrum to 5G for very high speed application, so-called enhanced broadband. This slide demonstrates just the level of harmonization through the regions. So on the left column, you can see 5 frequency bands identified by the conference. And then you have the number of countries in which IMT can be used. So for your region, region 2, 4 out of 5 bands are fully harmonized except 45.5, 47 gigahertz band. Next slide it gives some history in identification of bands for IMT. You have 2 charts, but they're identical in principle. Just the first, in upper part, it's in linear scale, and the lower part, it's in logarithmic scale to see better the picture. So as you see, every second conference, starting with conference 92, then 2000, 2007, etc., they were adding some bands for IMT services. And currently it's around 19,136 megahertz band, total band available for IMT. Some people think that the conference looked only at millimeter bands. It's correct, but on the other hand, there is also agenda item 8 of the conference. Normally is used to delete the countries from footnotes, but in some conditions, countries can join the footnote. So if all neighbors in agreement and nobody objects. So it means that even for the bands below 5 gigahertz, these bands are here, for example, 600, 700, 3.3, 3.6 gigahertz band. At the conference, some country was joining the footnotes allowing this identification. And in this way, more countries can operate IMT stations in the bands below 5 gigahertz. I would like to underline that the both processes are very important. The process of identification for IMT and process of allocation. Identification now means harmonization of the bands, and harmonization is very important because it brings the cost of equipment down. It reduces the price of terminals, base station, because everybody uses the same frequency bands. User terminal becoming cheap and roaming can be reached because countries use more or less the same frequency bands. Then hubs, the second big agenda at the conference, very interesting. It's not new technology. I remember we had in our database 120 records for hubs in 1997 from 7 countries, but then it stopped. The project stopped, and now with technologies, with light composite material, especially with batteries, which have long life batteries, this technology came back. These are stations, either balloons or more popular is drones at 20 kilometer height with service area about 50 kilometer. They can be used for 2 purposes. At least proponents claim that can be used as backhaul link for IMT base station or for direct delivery of broadband to user. So several bands were already identified or designated for hubs before this conference, but they were either very narrow or not in all countries. So what this conference did, it first enlarged the existing bands, some of them, And second, it designated or identified new bands for hubs. So 5 bands were identified totally with 5.25 gigahertz of spectrum available. And here you can see the bands which are identified by this conference. So this slide gives the details of such identification. So for region 2, maybe I will start with, you see the second bullet point. So worldwide identification in 31, and especially in U-band 38, 39.5 gigahertz band. So this is very valuable band for hubs because it's very large, 1.5 gigahertz, and because it's worldwide, and thirdly, because it's identified in both directions of transmission, from ground and to the ground. And this small table, it gives the summary of identification. We expect this technology can be useful, especially for developing countries, maybe for countries in your region, for Caribbean countries, because one of the tasks of this technology is to make disaster recovery communications possible. If something happens and terrestrial infrastructure is destroyed, these hubs can be quite rapidly deployed, and we saw the examples of Loon project which made this possible. So the next platform used for broadband delivery is Erlan or Wi-Fi. So they used for internet connectivity, delivery of data, offloading of mobile traffic, and offloading of mobile traffic. You know, it's becoming real relief for cellular communications. Some of my colleagues, they installed the program on smartphones which calculate the bits of information which transmitted by cellular base stations and by Wi-Fi. And in some cases, it's per 1 bit of information received through base station, through cellular communication, they have 10 bits of information received through Wi-Fi. This shows the importance of offloading of mobile traffic. So this technology needs also badly needs additional spectrum. Total requirements 880 megahertz, and 5 bands, candidates bands, were considered by the conference. So they are summarized here. Unfortunately, in 4 out of 5 bands, there was no decision, no change for these 4 bands because of difficulty in sharing with existing services, and the upper band 5850, 5925, people see it more for intelligent transport system. So the only thing decision was taken, it's for the band 5150, 5250, and this band before it was restricted to indoor usage inside buildings. And now it is allowed for trains with some maximum ERP, in the cars also with some limitation of ERP, and for so-called controlled outdoor usage up to 200 milliwatt on the condition that the total number of this outdoor usage of higher power outdoor airlines doesn't exceed 2% of the total number of airlines in the bands. All this condition you can see in resolution 229 revised by the last conference. So these 4 bands, unfortunately, no decision was made by the conference. The next blocks of issue is transport, communications, it's railway, communications between train and track side. So railway application, they use very much radio for different purposes: traffic control, passenger safety, train security for train operations. And the task of the conference was to harmonize the usage of the frequency, because if train goes from one country to other country, it should use the same frequency, otherwise it becomes costly and difficult. So the conference developed one resolution to facilitate harmonization of such application. train radio communications. Another agenda item was for intelligent transport system, ITS. It's aimed at the, first of all, of course, for increase of security and safety of life at roads. Now we have 1.4 billion cars in the world with big annual increase in number, and number of people dead in the car accidents is 1.3 million per year. So radio communication can play a great role in increasing the safety on the roads by enabling these intelligent transport systems. These systems use two types of equipment, cellular communications and the Wi-Fi type of equipment, and they used for talking between vehicles. Vehicle talk to infrastructure, and vehicle can talk to everything for different purposes to enable safe driving. So the conference considered this harmonization with special focus on 5850, 5925 megahertz, and it developed a recommendation which encourages to use harmonized band globally on a regional basis. And one more block of issues, I put them together, it's maritime aeronautical issues. I will go quite fast just to check the time. Yeah. So the conference provided some frequency for NAVDAT system. This is future replacement of NAVTEX system, which is used by mariners for different types of warning, navigation warning, meteorological, iceberg warning, piracy warning, etc. So some bands were provided in MF low band and also an HF band for this new system. Also, conference enabled introduction of additional GMD satellite system, Iridium, in the radio regulations. This system was very much wanted by maritime community because so far it uses mainly Inmarsat system and with some limitation of, do you hear me?
Yes, yes, we hear you.
Sound. Nigel, do you hear me?
We are hearing you fine.
Hello?
Hello, maybe you are not hearing us. Are you hearing us, Nikolai? I guess not.
Can you put in chat, do you hear me?
We're hearing you. We're hearing you.
Do you hear? Yeah?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So something happened. So this system is used for safety of life applications, for transmission of distress and safety signals, and the conference included the part of the band used by the system in Appendix 15, which contains distress and safety frequencies. Then one more quite small but interesting agenda item, maritime agenda item, it's so-called autonomous maritime radio devices. These are driver locator, efficient buoys, etc. So they created big difficulties for mariners. I remember one captain telling that during night he was navigating in open sea and he saw around 20 ships going towards him on his screen locator, because this is automatic identification system locator, but it appeared just the fishing buoys there. So in order to make regulations for such utilization and separate these very small and non-safety applications, the conference designated special channels for these applications. The same it did for so-called VHF data exchange system, VDS. Last conference provided frequency for terrestrial component near the coast, and this conference added frequencies for space operation of this system to enlarge the coverage of this system. Then aeronautical issues, there is almost no decision concerning aeronautical issues because it was one agenda item proposing to reflect so-called global aeronautical risk and safety system gaps in the radio regulations, but the conference decided not to do it because there was difficulty to translate the terminology of this system, the idea of this system in radio regulatory language, in frequencies and systems which can be used. And suborbital flights also, the studies was not quite finished by the end of this conference. So this conference decided to postpone and to establish new agenda item for the next conference. I would just say one word at post-conference activity. So as you know, the WRC-19 decisions enter into force on 1st January, will enter into force on 1st January 2021. But there are some exceptions, and these exceptions, they are summarized in resolution 99 of the conference. For example, for terrestrial, this is some IMT identifications which entered into force immediately after the conference. Radio Communication Bureau already published definitive final acts of the conference. You can see here the link in 6 languages, and PDF version is free of charge for all TICE users there. As for new radio regulations, edition 2020, they are scheduled for publication. Now I have a little bit more precise information in the end of September 2020. We issued several circular letters, and one of them is 456, which summarizes the conference decision in the minutes of the plenary. And now the Radio Regulations Board, it works on the rules of procedure, which result from conference decision. BI is updating documentation and software as a result of conference decision, and regulators, countries, administrations, they also invited to revise their documentation, for example, national frequency allocation tables. I will stop here, I think, and yeah, we have not much time. I think, Jorge, you can go to the next conference. I will do it the same for terrestrial, and then we go to question, unless, Nigel, you prefer to have questions now.
No, there is one question, but we can deal with it at the end. So you can go ahead. You're muted, Jorge.
Thank you. I think you were reading my mouth. I was trying to say.
Yes.
Thank you very much. We are learning new skills during this seminar as well. So I was saying that I'm trying to share the screen, and we are going to move to the...
Yes, let me stop the first sharing. Okay, you can go ahead now.
So we are going to try to travel in time and move to the WRC 23. Tell me if you can see something now.
Not yet. I think it maybe.
Okay, in the meantime, I'm starting to say something. So this is going to be a short presentation in the sense that, as you know, we are at the very beginning of the cycle, TICE cycle, no? And basically we are trying to show here how it works, the WRC. Do you see it?
Yes, now.
Okay.
The WRC 23 roadmap on space issues.
Exactly, perfect.
Right.
So I would say we are going to see the roadmap to WRC 23. Probably you have been introduced and be a little bit familiar to this cycle. So something important that we didn't mention yet from WRC 19 is that in addition to the agenda items that we have seen in details from both terrestrial and space, there is also a couple of more resolutions which are dealing with the agenda of the next conference. And for that, there is a full working group working with that during the conference to establish what are the the needs for the next conference and for the next study cycle. So in this case, the resolution is the resolution 811, WRC 19, which states all the agenda items, or let's say the menu de jour for the next conference. And so this is going to be published in the next edition of the radio regulation. I think it's this year, 2020. And during these 4 years of study cycle, thanks to the technological advances and the user requirements, they are contributing to the study groups and feeding them with all the studies required in order to arrive to the next conference. So starting from the last WRC 19, just a few days after the conference finished, the CPM, Conference Preparatory Meeting 1, had a meeting, and they allocate all the agenda items, all the work to the different study groups. During these 4 years, there will be contribution from different sectors, from the administrations, from the regional groups, and also from the sector members, the industry, and we'll be studying and debating and finally proposing solutions for that, no? So this will be consolidated, consolidated in the CPM report, having also a meeting called CPM2, and finally submitted to the next conference as an informative document. There will be a new radio assembly, and finally WRC 23, no? So this is the 4 years study cycle. Probably you also have seen this picture many times, but it's basically showing this cycle and all the contributors to the WRC, started from the CPM2 we just mentioned, all the ITU member states, the director with the suggestions and the activities and difficulties found during these 4 years, the Radio Regulation Board, and every member state and regional group. And finally, they will again come to the decisions, the discussions, and finally to the modified radio regulations. So just to introduce a little bit quickly, as I mentioned, the new items that we are going to see during this year. Suborbital vehicles is one of them, not trying to provide a regulatory mechanism for those cases that is being envisioned to use more and more. Also aeronautical mobile satellite in the 117.975 to 137 megahertz, allocation in both directions. The agenda item 1.8 promised to be also another interesting agenda item. In the WRC 15, if I don't remember well, was introduced the first time the resolution 155, which was modified now, the 19. And well, there is a need to accommodate or improve this resolution in terms of the use of FSS networks by control of non-payload communication for drones, no, and unmanned aircraft systems. So this is a very important subject as well, and certainly there will be a lot of discussions perhaps. Going to the scientific community, we have another item related to new secondary allocation for the air exploration satellite services active for use by spaceborne radar sounders around 45 megahertz, but also an upgrade to allocation of KU band for the space research. Continuing with the scientific community, we have also the possibility of adjustment to existing allocations for a new primary allocation to ESS passive, but in this case over 200 gigahertz. And now going more to the the side of the communication side, let's say, or more commercial aspects, we have the agenda item 115, which is to harmonize the use of frequency band in KU band, specifically 1275, 1325 for the uplink for air stations on board of aircraft and vessels communicating with GSO. So we have a lot of different adjustments, let's say, in portion of bands in either KU or KA, which are trying to be harmonized at the global level. If we look at also to the agenda item 119 on the bottom, we'll see that there is a, in particular for this region, for region 2 Americas, there is a new primary allocation for the FSS in the space to earth 17.3 to 17.7 in order to be aligned with another region as well. No, this part was not used, so now region 2 will count with 400 megahertz more if it is approved. Another important point is the SIMs for NGSO. Up to now, we have explained that the WRC-19 did a lot of efforts and achieved a regulatory framework for SIMs for GSO. And now it is envisioned that there is the same need for the NGSO constellation in KU1. So this is one of the also perhaps highlights agenda item for the next cycle. Another interesting or exciting item is the intersatellite links. More and more there is this need also to have communication between nodes or different satellite systems, and it has to be clarified, let's say, in which part and under which conditions. So for that reason, there is a new agenda item 117 assigned for the next conference. Finally, we are going to agenda item 7, which is an standing agenda item to deal with the regulatory procedures for space services. And here we have a collection of different issues that were assigned. One of them is the tolerances for certain orbital characteristics of NGSO, which I mentioned before when we were presenting the milestone-based approach, and also the agenda item 1.6 for NGSO in Q and B band. So in this case, there is a need to establish clear, let's say, criteria to identify up to what point one tolerance can be admitted or not when we are speaking about modification of certain orbital parameters when comparing between what was notified and what is actually being used. Also, during the WRC-19, there were discussions that there is a need to have a procedure for the post-milestone, because up to now we have spoken about how is the milestone-based approach. So we arrived to the 100%, but what happened after? No? So this is the other issue. These are two different tasks of the correspondence group 5, which is already been working. And another one is also the protection of GSO in the MSS, in the X78 GHz and the 2030 GHz from the NGSO. On top of that, we have something also coming from the agenda item 1.6 for NGSO in Q and B band, which is to develop the methodology to calculate this aggregate interference from NGSO that we were speaking about, no, with respect to supplemental GSO links. So this is not completely finished. It has to be completed during this study cycle. And another point is just moving to another resolution is the methodology to calculate the PFD for the SIMS aero. No? So that's another thing to be complete. And finally, we always have issues in terms of FSS and BSS technical characteristics, which are being always updated. So this is somehow a summary of the items that we are going to discuss during these 4 years, and then finally to be found as a solution during the next WRC-23. For those who are interested, you have to remember that it's not only those agenda items and groups which are allocated, but also any other agenda item where space services are sharing the same frequency band or they are locating adjacent bands, so that they can be affected. No? So these are normally the study groups that you should participate if you are interested. So that's in summary what we have, as I said, for the next 4 years. And this is really the very preliminary stage because it's the first year. And also with the issue of the COVID, the meetings were held remotely. So it is progressing, but maybe not in the piece that everybody is expecting now. But there are already correspondence groups which are meeting, and it is expected to have the next meetings either in person or virtually again after the summer holidays. If you have any question, you can see it now or maybe later after Nikolai with all together.
Yes, thank you, Jorge. We don't have any right now, so maybe Nikolai could just run straight on and then we'll wind up. So go ahead, Nikolai. Yeah.
Do you hear my screen now?
Yes, we see it. You just need to go to
again the same exercise.
Yes. think it just takes a while, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it seems to be okay.
Yeah.
So the next conference will be quite balanced from the point of view of space and terrestrial services, more or less half agenda item terrestrial, half space service. Again, I grouped them by some platforms, and the first group is IMT and hubs. It includes several agenda items. The first is 1.1, protection aeronautical and ship station in international airspace and waters. This is formulated like aeronautical and ship maritime agenda item, but in fact it's about IMT, how it should protect aeronautical and maritime service. So the last conference identified the band 4.8, 4.99 for IMT in 39 countries. And it introduced the limit, PFD limit, to protect these applications. This limit is quite stringent. Our calculations show that to meet this limit, the IMT station should be moved away from the coast by the distance around 500 kilometers. So it restricts national usage of IMT in these bands. And the conference invited WOC23 to look again at this limit. In addition, there is some gray area in the radio regulations on protecting station in international airspace and waters, and the conference is supposed to provide some regulations. One question which is not written in the resolution, but it discussed between people. For example, if the country has the plans to introduce IMT in its own country, shall it protect application in aircraft or ships of other countries, which are sometimes located 1,000 kilometers from this IMT country, and they may fly once per year or never. So this is also quite sensitive question. It's not articulated in resolutions, but this is one of the main issue of this agenda item. Agenda item 1.2, it's additional identification of several bands for IMT. IMT community already got some identifications in the bands, let's say below 5 gigahertz and above 24 gigahertz, but it looks for so-called mid bands, which have good balance between capacity and coverage. So conference will consider, is it possible to identify IMT and how to protect existing services in these bands. Then we have agenda item 1.3, but this is purely a region one issue. It's possible identification for IMT in allocation to mobile service in 3.6, 3.8 gigahertz. CPT already took decision for Europe to use this band for IMT, and Arab group and some African countries are in favor of such identification, while other countries, they use FSS in this band, so there will be some discussions of this band. Then agenda item 1.4, this is use of hubs as IMT base station. The previous conference provided spectrum for hubs as fixed service applications, but this application is a part of IMT. So it's base station placed somewhere quite high to provide connectivity and quite large footprint. So three bands, candidates bands will be discussed. All these bands are below 2.7 gigahertz. Then we have so-called issue agenda item 9.1c. This is a consideration of possibility to introduce IMT in the fixed service bands for fixed wireless application, for example, 10.7, 11.7 band for some connection and broadband for fixed usage. Then we have 1.5. This is again region one issue. Region one is looking, or mobile community in this region looking at the band below 700 megahertz to be identified for IMT. Now we have several agenda items for aeronautical and maritime. 1.6 suborbital vehicles, I think Jorge already mentioned. Then we have small agenda item on introduction of digital technology and wideband technology in the aeronautical HF bands in so-called Appendix 27. Now it's very narrow channels in this frequency plan. So aeronautical community would like to use wideband digital technology in these bands. Then 1.10, this is spectrum needs and new allocations for aeronautical mobile service for non-safety applications, for example, for drones. And there are two candidate bands for such application, 15.4, 15.7, and around 22 gigahertz band. And the last terrestrial agenda item 111, this is support of modernization of global maritime distress safety communication system and e-navigation. So as you know, around 25% of the first volume of radio regulations devoted to maritime issues. Now IMO finalizing modernization of GMDSS, and this work should be reflected in the radio regulations. We have some standing agenda item. I would like just to draw attention to one, to agenda item 8, which is dealing with deletion of country footnotes of country names from RR footnotes. So this is activities which should be undertaken in each administration. This is very short observation of what agenda items are placed at the agenda of the next radio conference.
Okay. All right. There are a couple questions or comments. Are there any more presenters?
No, we're finished here.
Right. Okay. So we can just deal with the questions to wind up now. One is quite simple from NILL. What's the difference between eSIM and ESV?
Okay, I will take it, I think. In fact, this was evolving, no? So we have at the very beginning air station on board of vessel in C and KU band, so ESVs, also with certain restrictions in terms of ERP and elevation angle and so on. Then there is one more, which was ESOMs, which then finally, when eSIMs came, ESOMs, if I remember well, was air station on mobile platforms. And then finally it was converged in eSIMs for the case of KU, KA band, let's say, no? But okay, the restrictions, let's say, or the limits are different depending on the frequency band. But basically, in all the cases are platforms or terminals which are used for certain mobility using the FSS GSO frequency bands. Okay. That's basically the answer, I think.
Right. So, okay. So, could we say that the eSIM might be a more general term, all Earth stations in motion?
Yeah, yes, certainly, yes.
Yes, whether it's on a vehicle or a mobile platform or
yes.
whatever. Right.
And the good point of that is that because it is being used more broadly, let's say for eSIMs, no, for example in KA band, with higher frequency bands and also in more regions, and there is more demand. That was the reason of this new regulatory framework, to protect another services and to allow to be licensed properly and used and operated.
Right. Okay. Someone was asking if there was an acronym list or like a glossary for all the acronyms we're using in this webinar. I don't know if that was catered for. Anyone? Is there anything like that? We're talking about FSS and eSIMs and all these things. Did we create a list of those acronyms, what they mean for somebody who might not be familiar with all of them?
Yes, there may be many different acronyms, but all the definitions are in the Article 1 of the radio regulation, as it was explained by Joaquin before.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also refer to the preface. Probably in the preface, I don't remember exactly now, but I think there may be also acronyms referring to the radio regulation.
I think you're right.
And in addition to that, if we are speaking about certain acronyms more related to modulation, etc., it's better to refer maybe to some another satellite communications handbook. No? But in between radio regulations and the preface, plus some, there is a study group on terminology, I think. There you can find all of them.
Okay.
Maybe Nikolai, I don't know if he wants to complement what I say, but.
Do you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I don't remember that we have, let's say, compilation of all acronyms there, but I would recommend people to use the CPM report, so-called CPM report of the conference preparatory meeting. Because almost all terminology which is used at this webinar, it's also listed in the this report, which is more than 600 pages. And in very end, we have several pages of acronyms. The acronyms for radio communication services for different applications and for other radio communication terminology normally used in the ITU. It's quite full. It's not 100%, but it's so-called the report of the conference preparatory meeting, for example, for conference 2019.
Right. Okay, that's good advice, I think. So the CPM report is a good reference for this purpose, and it's also a ready reference because we're talking about these WRCSUs. So it is a document that you would definitely be looking for. And then we have Jose Viveros Roja. Part of the C-band in the North America region in a short time frame will be vacated to be used for IMT as part of a resolution of the FCC, which will affect availability in the region. Although it is not an ITU resolution, what is the ITU's point of view on this? And is the band 3.7 to 4 gigahertz to be treated in 2023 WRC to be allocated to IMT? Do you think that would be one of the things that would be discussed in 2023?
I think it will be partly discussed. So we have two agenda items. So agenda item 1.2, additional allocation, IMT identification in 3.6, 3.8 for region 2. So
right.
The current situation, we have global identification of IMT in 3.4 to 3.6, 200 megahertz. So next conference will look at the next 200 megahertz to extend IMT up to 3.8. But the question I understand it's if the band up to 4 gigahertz discussed, the answer is no. So what will be discussed is 3.6 to 3.8.
Right.
3.6, taking into account that we already have, after WOC15, global identification for band 3.4 to 3.6. So maybe I should say in the way that the total C-band is 800 megahertz, and low part, low 400, they either already identified for MT or will be considered for identification at the next conference. It will be half-half. But conference will not consider above 3.8.
Right, okay. All right, thank you very much. I think that is the last of our questions. I don't know if Joaquin, you have anything you might want to say? Is he there? Well, maybe not. All right, I would then just say thanks for now to Jorge and Nikolai and also Joaquin from ITU for our presentations this morning. Say thanks to the over 200 of us who participated. I see it got close to 250. We invite you again to come back tomorrow where we will continue on the agenda of our regional radio communications seminar at from 9 o'clock Eastern Caribbean time. That's in the time zone of UTC -4. And thanks again to all, and we look forward to you again joining us tomorrow. Thank you.